Sleep researchers have identified a small group of people who sleep more than 9 hours a night and wake up feeling completely fine. Meanwhile, a much larger group sleeps just as long and wakes up exhausted, foggy, and unable to function. For decades, both groups got lumped into the same lazy stereotype, and that stereotype was almost entirely wrong. The real explanation involves specific genes, specific medical conditions, and a distinction most people have never even heard of. Stick with this video, and you'll understand exactly why some people's bodies genuinely require more sleep, and what that says about your own. Let's start with the stereotype itself, because it's built on 3 overlapping assumptions that each contain a tiny grain of truth. People assume long sleepers are lazy, depressed, or simply love sleep too much, and each label captures only part of the real picture. Long sleepers are somewhat more likely to show depressive symptoms on screening tests. They're often judged as unmotivated, and they do often say they enjoy sleep. But none of those surface observations explain the actual mechanisms driving long sleep, which researchers have spent decades mapping out. Here's the distinction that changes everything: voluntary long sleep versus physiological long sleep. Voluntary long sleep happens when someone has nothing to do, so they sleep in simply because their day has no structure pulling them out of bed. Physiological long sleep is different entirely. The duration is set by internal biological, neurological, or medical drivers the person usually can't identify on their own. Popular coverage almost always assumes the first type and applies its lazy label to people experiencing the second type. In the late 1980s, sleep researcher Claudio Stampi identified a distinct population he called true long sleepers. These individuals, about 7 to 8% of adults in self-report surveys, consistently sleep more than 9 hours without feeling groggy or sluggish. They report feeling alert and productive after long sleep in a way typical 7 to 8 hour sleepers simply can't replicate. Stampi described this as a variant of normal sleep architecture. Not a disorder, not a flaw, just a different biological setting. And now genetics backs this up with actual data. A 2013 study, followed by a 2019 study, identified variants of the PAX8 gene near chromosome 2q that correlate with longer sleep duration. Other gene variants, including ABC9 and several in the adenosine pathway, have also been linked to long sleep needs. In plain terms, some people's nervous systems genuinely need more sleep to complete their nightly restoration process, and that's written into their biology. Long sleepers also share specific sleep patterns worth knowing. They get more slow-wave deep sleep, without a disproportionate increase in REM sleep, meaning their extra hours come from deeper physiological stages, not extra dreaming. They also need more recovery time after sleep deprivation experiments than typical sleepers, proving their need is real, not just an adjustment to minor sleep debt. Critically, their intelligence and motivation test scores sit within the normal range compared to everyone else. Now let's talk about the medical side, because this is where the real complexity lies. Hypersomnia is the clinical term for excessive sleepiness or excessive total sleep duration caused by a medical condition. Idiopathic hypersomnia is one of the most important. People with it often sleep 10 to 14 hours or more, with long naps that still don't leave them refreshed. It was split off from narcolepsy after doctors noticed these patients lacked the cataplexy and REM disruption that defines narcolepsy. Narcolepsy itself can also drive long total sleep, especially when patients compensate for fragmented nighttime sleep with longer episodes. Then there's Klein-Levin syndrome, an extremely rare condition causing bouts of 15 to 20 hours of sleep a day, lasting days or weeks, mostly in adolescent males. Chronic fatigue syndrome often produces the same pattern: sleep past 10 hours that still leaves the person feeling unrefreshed and depleted. Sleep apnea fragments sleep so badly that the body compensates by extending total sleep time, meaning the long sleep is a symptom, not a preference. And then there's depression, which is the condition most strongly linked to long sleep at the population level. Research shows long sleep, typically defined as 9 to 10 plus hours, is actually a stronger depression risk marker than short sleep is. The relationship runs both directions. Long sleep can signal depression risk, and it can also be an active symptom of depression already present. This is exactly why the simple, long sleepers are depressed stereotype falls apart. It's collapsing several very different populations into one label. There's also a metabolic angle almost nobody talks about. Long sleep is linked in studies to higher rates of cardiovascular disease, obesity, type 2 diabetes, and stroke. But most research papers are clear that long sleep is usually the consequence, not the cause, of these problems. Chronic inflammation can drive both long sleep and metabolic risk at the same time, from the same underlying source. Undiagnosed sleep apnea causes fragmented sleep. The body extends total sleep to compensate, and the apnea itself drives cardiovascular risk directly. Forcing a long sleeper to sleep less without finding the underlying cause typically fails and can actually make things worse. So what do biological long sleepers actually say about their own experience? In interviews, they consistently describe feeling best only after sleeping long enough, with worse mood and cognitive performance later in the day. Their motivation ramps up later than short-sleeping peers, and when forced to rise early, they describe themselves as slower, more forgetful, and more irritable. That's not laziness. That's the actual phenomenology of physiological long sleep, described the same way across different studies. When their schedule allows flexibility, through self-employment or late-start careers, they often show better career progression and mood stability than when forced onto a strict 7-hour norm. A few lesser-known factors are worth knowing too. Night owls, people with a late chronotype, often sleep longer and later, and get misjudged as long sleepers even when their actual sleep duration is normal for them. Hormones matter as well. The menstrual cycle, early pregnancy, menopause, and low thyroid function can all push sleep duration longer. Teenagers aged 13 to 18 naturally need 9 to 10 hours because their circadian system shifts later during adolescence. So judging them by adult norms is a category error. Some athletes in high-contact or ballistic sports are documented long sleepers, since sleep functions as active tissue recovery for their training load. Autism spectrum adults commonly report longer sleep needs, tied to sensory overload recovery and differences in melatonin timing. Chronic trauma can extend sleep too, since a sustained alert nervous system gets compensated for with more, though often non-restorative, sleep. And substance withdrawal, especially from alcohol, benzodiazepines, or opioids, drives long sleep as the nervous system recalibrates itself during recovery. So the practical takeaway is this: figure out first whether long sleep is voluntary or physiological, because they need completely different responses. A sleep study, a thyroid panel, and a depression screen can identify most of the medical drivers behind long sleep in a matter of weeks. But there's one more group of long sleepers we haven't covered yet, and their cause is completely different from everything in this video. I'm covering exactly who they are in the next video, so go watch it if any part of this described someone you know.